Welcome to Cal Talks. This is Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida. And this is our podcast, where we dive into the main topics affecting livestock and forage production in the southeastern United States. Join us in this journey as we tackle the main issues affecting our producers and the sustainability of our production systems. Welcome to Cal Talks. This is Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader with the University of Florida. Today, the topic is mow crickets, something that we're seeing a resurgence in Florida, and a lot of our farmers are interested in learning more what's the ecology of the creature and how to control. My guests today are Dr. Norm Lepla and Wilhelm Pivovarek. Wilhelm is a master's student in entomology, and Dr. Lepla is a professor in IPM, Integrated Pest Management and Biological Control. He's been with the University of Florida for quite a while, and a lot of the folks that have done mow cricket control in the past probably heard your name. Pleasure to have you here. Thanks for coming. Mow cricket has been a pest in Florida before, and one of the reasons we have Wilhelm working again is because we saw some resurgence, as we mentioned before. But what was mow cricket in Florida? What's the problem? What's the timeline in the infestation and spread that we had in the past? Can you tell us a little bit of the history of this pest in Florida?
Well, these invasive mow crickets came from South America, probably on ship ballast around 1900. They came into Georgia and Florida, and like so many invasive species, at first it wasn't a problem, and then they got into vegetables, caused tremendous problems, got into pasture. And by about 1920, we were beginning to see real significant pest problems, particularly in Bahia grass, because Bahia grass also comes from the home of the mow crickets in South America, and they're co-adapted. So you have a ready-made problem in the pasture, and we're trying to deal with that for the rest of the century.
So mow cricket is a problem that came from South America, but the problematic mow cricket, are there other types of mow cricket here that are native and not as problematic?
So absolutely. So in Florida, there's one species of native mole cricket, which is not a pest of pasture. It eats plants and insects about equally to our understanding, but it's very rare in pasture. All the invasive mole crickets can be problems, but it's really one species in North Florida, the tawny mole cricket, that is primarily a pest in pasture because it eats mostly plant matter, while one of the other species that we have in North Florida, the southern mole cricket, mostly eats insects and so isn't as much of a problem in pasture.
So seeing mow crickets doesn't mean we have a problem here. It could be one of those other native species.
So in pasture, normally when you see mole crickets, it's going to be one of the two of the tawny and the southern mole cricket, and they're usually in about equal abundance in pasture. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have a problem, but you're usually not going to see the native mole cricket in high abundance at all in pasture.
Very interesting. Dr. Lepla, this is not something new to us. As you mentioned, it came in the early 1900s. The problem was identified in the past. There had been previous efforts in terms of pest control, localized and also statewide efforts to control this pest. Can you tell us a little bit of what were those types of controls and how effective they were? Tell us a little bit of the history of the larva and also the parasitic nematode.
Well, I probably should start with the insecticides because that's what first line defense was. And those insecticides evolved until we had a bait that worked very well. The bait, however, had side effects. It killed other organisms that we wanted to retain. So it was removed from the market and we had nothing. At that point, in about the 1980s, our entomologist did foreign exploration and brought in 3 natural enemies. One was this Lara wasp, another was a nematode, and the third one was a fly.
So those were biological controls and they were released around the state, right? How did those biological controls work?
Well, they are actually released at different times and in different ways. The Lara wasp was released in Florida, and it spread with the mole cricket through southern states. The nematode was a difficult problem because it has to be grown in a mole cricket before it can be released. It is host specific, so it doesn't kill non-target mole crickets, that is non-invasive mole crickets or non-pests. That one we were able to get mass produced like other nematodes through fermentation, and we made a product called Nematac S. The way we were able to do that was the Florida Cattlemen and the legislature helped us establish the Mole Cricket Task Force, and that gave us enough funding for our scientists to do this work and to get that product out and spread throughout the state. The fly The third one is parasitic, and it seems to have a problem going north of Central Florida. So it's from Central Florida to South Florida, and it's restricted to that area.
Okay, so the fly did not survive very well across the state, but was a good solution for Central Florida. But pretty much the Larva bicolor, the wasp, and also the nematode were spread all across the state and were quite effective, right?
That's correct. But you have to have the habitat for those organisms to survive and do their job.
Okay, I like that you start with the history of the insecticide was one of the first reactions, and then the biological control. But normally people go, how can I kill it? What's the control and all that? And I said, okay, let's think about the biology of the pest and the ecology of the pest. Johan, can you tell us a little bit of the life cycle, preferred habitats, and also seasonal activity and behavior of the most crickets, so we can understand how they behave to then understand what are the options for controlling them?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the tawny mole cricket, which is the major pest of pastures in Florida, in North Florida, they only have one generation per year. And so the adults are going to emerge and fly around March, and then they're going to have little baby mole crickets starting to hatch out and become active in May. And then those little babies are going to grow throughout the summer months until they become really big, fat juveniles and adults in the fall. And it's usually in the late fall that people really start to report and notice damage from mole crickets, because that's when you have this high abundance of really large mole crickets. But actually, if you're able to target the mole crickets, you really want to get rid of those little babies early in the year. And that's what we do in turf grass, where we can use pesticides. But unfortunately, that's not really an option in pasture today.
Perfect. Pretty good segue for the next question. In terms of control that we have today, you mentioned we don't have any insecticides that are labeled, and we can argue also that they're effective in terms of pasture, control of mole cricket in pasture. So is there anything we can do now for mole cricket control in pastures?
Well, from my standpoint, integrated pest management is the way to go. And the cornerstone of integrated pest management is cultural practices. We call it that. What it means is taking care of whatever that host material is for the mole cricket. In this case, take care of the pasture. Plant grasses that are resistant, and we have lists of those on our mole cricket guide, which is available from our EDIS extension publications. It's a little complicated, but planting resistant varieties and then maintaining those so that they're very, very healthy, and working with other things that happen, such as flooding, which will kill mole crickets. Desiccation kills mole crickets. How many animals, such as cows, you put on that pasture. Irrigation so that you have good, healthy grass again. There are just all these ways other than trying to kill the pest. And we call those cultural practices, and we focus on prevention through habitat management.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm big on management, because a lot of the times with the reaction, the herbicide, the insecticide, we're not really targeting the problem.
Yeah.
We're targeting the symptom. So I know a lot of our producers get very frustrated when we say, well, there's not much you can do now, because they want something to apply right away to solve the problem of the mole cricket. But in truth, normally we're seeing a bigger range of problems in that pasture management or crop management, whatever it is, that's resulting into several effects and then mole cricket. You've been sampling pastures across the state and looking for mole crickets. What has been your experience so far, especially in terms of when people call you and say like, hey, I have a mole cricket problem, and they label that as, okay, that's a mole cricket problem. What's the pasture conditions you are seeing? Well, what is leading to that?
So I've had producers that report mole cricket problems, and I will go to their pasture and find fairly high numbers of mole crickets. So I think for a lot of these producers, mole crickets could certainly still be a problem in their pastures, and I often associate that with like highly degraded pastures. For other producers that report problems, I find less density of mole crickets. In my experience, they're just about always there, and I think it's more of a question, are they in enough numbers in the pasture that they're actually causing any reasonable damage to the grass, or is it another issue? And I think for producers that think they have mole cricket problems, identifying whether it's really mole crickets or if there's another issue first is the first steps. And so definitely talk to your local extension agents on that front.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what we see a lot. It's often when we get a call for a mole cricket problem, it's not the underlying issue in the pasture. It's just something that is taking advantage. And I see a lot of the pastures just that have that poor management, as Dr. Lepla mentioned, is overgrazing or just poor fertilization, poor nutrition. And nutrition normally only think about nitrogen in terms of nutrition for pasture, but a big component of that plant persistence is with the potassium, for example, that is low in many of our pastures. So the balance of nutrients may make sure managed well becomes a very important thing to prevent that mole cricket or any other pests and diseases to come. So, Wilhelm, we mentioned a little bit about your sampling effort and new projects. I want to learn more about and tell our listeners a little bit more about your project and what we're trying to do and what we're seeing to promote the work we have been doing in this partnership between the Forage Group and Entomology Group.
Yeah, absolutely. So for my project, I'm doing my master's degree under Dr. Norm Lepla here. And there's really kind of three parts that have come out of this project. Two are focused on the mole crickets. One is my physical sampling of mole crickets. So I'm going out to people's farms and pastures and trying to sample mole crickets and see about what numbers I'm finding and try to get more information on what the actual populations and situations with the mole crickets is on farms. And supplementary to that, we're also distributing a survey to producers around the state, and that's to get more broad scale knowledge beyond what I can, as one guy, go out and physically sample and get reports from people on whether mole crickets are an issue in their pasture, whether they're not an issue in their pasture, and see if we can tease apart any associations or correlations to pasture conditions, environmental conditions, pasture management practices, to also having that mole cricket issue.
Perfect. And for those that want to learn more about your survey, we are going to put the link for the survey in the description of this podcast and also on YouTube so you can interact with us. And also always contact your local extension agent or us through the email forages@ifas.ufl.edu to learn more about this project and see how you can interact with us and, well, learn more about your operation. I want to go back to the biological control. So we went pretty quickly over several of the important milestones here. So we had a mole cricket problem in early 1900s. Insecticides developed. We came with biological control, and it worked.
It worked.
So what happened? If the biological control worked, why we're seeing more cases of mole cricket now?
We're not really sure, and that's why Wilhelm's out there trying to understand the system better. But a couple of things he mentioned in integrated pest management, the second step is to identify, first of all, you have an infestation, identify what the pest is. So he's out there trying to figure out if it is a mole cricket or if it is, as typically, a lot of different factors and organisms. And then what is the management threshold? How much can the grass tolerate the mole crickets? So all of this feeds into what are the management practices. And for pasture, you can't afford to spend a lot of money per acre. Insecticides are expensive. Even today, if they were registered, might not be able to use them because of cost. So biocontrol is sustainable. It's established. The mole cricket nematode works just fine. It's not available commercially anymore. And we don't know whether it's subsided someplace or if it's not as effective as it was. We just don't have an answer to why we're hearing more complaints than we had. And that's why Wilhelm's out there investigating.
It's very interesting. I was wondering if because when you think about population dynamics, you have that predator-prey relationship.
Yeah.
And when you have a lot of prey, mole cricket, and you implement a predator, wasp or nematode, and all of a sudden that prey population goes down, it's going to take that predator population down because they are going to lack feed, forage. I was wondering if that's the dynamic we're seeing here, and if we can get back to that higher predator population, biological control population, again, wasp or nematode to tackle this issue.
And so what's happening that I think I'm seeing out there in these pastures is that I think what you're saying could have been correct, because what we had was, when you look at the populations of mole crickets in the historical data, you had really high populations of mole crickets prior to the release of biocontrol agents, particularly the nematode and Lara bicolor, the wasp. After the release of the nematode and Lara bicolor, you get a substantial drop in the mole cricket populations. And so that's what we're saying when we're saying the biocontrol agents worked. That's what we're talking about. What I think is the problem a lot of time is not necessarily that Lara bicolor has now been knocked down after the mole crickets have been knocked down, but rather that it's not common in all places. So when I see Lara bicolor out in the field, some places it's extremely common, and other places, especially on these pastures that I've been evaluating, I can't find them whatsoever. And I think A big problem with that is that they don't have nectar hosts, because these wasps need nectar from flowers in order to survive as adults. And it's as larvae or the little baby wasps that actually kill and eat the mole crickets.
So we know from previous research, which actually is an interesting extension program that was very successful and created a different problem with spermaceti. So we know that spermaceti is one of the main sources for nectar to sustain the larva and was very effective, but also became a big problem in terms of invasiveness in our pasture, and it's hard to kill. Have you found any other sources? Are you looking into any other sources of nectar that could sustain those larvae, populations of larvae?
So absolutely. With Lara, spermaceti was really recommended a lot back in the day, and I think that's just because Lara bicolor, the wasps really like it. But I see them on a variety of different plants, but they are fairly picky in what they feed on. And that's actually earlier in the podcast I mentioned I had 3 projects. My third project is investigating what the wasps actually like to eat in terms of their flower hosts. And so I found a couple new plants that have not been recorded before for what they like to eat. And what I'm doing is actually a genetic analysis of the gut contents of the wasps to try to find if there's any other plants that come out in the DNA that's present in their guts from what nectar they've been feeding on, and see if we can find as good of a plant recommendation as possible.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward so much to the results of the research because it's scientifically and ecologically very, very interesting, but also can have a very important impact in the livestock industry in the southeastern United States.
That's what we're talking about in various ways is pasture is a system. It's an ecological system. It's complicated. And Wilhelm's looking at several variables. There are many things that affect the quality of the pasture other than a pest. And that's the system that we're trying to understand and perfect. Another thing that was mentioned is the balance. You do have to have hosts and you do have to have plant material for Lara wasps. If that gets disrupted, say with a chemical that perhaps isn't registered or perhaps is used improperly, you kill the host, you kill the system. You can't expect these natural enemies to operate like pesticides because they're not. They're living things. So they depend on that stability of a system to perpetuate and do what they are there to do.
I really like that as a closure comment because I love working in systems, and the problems that we are working with are not dissociated from the whole system. So we really need to think about all the interactions. Awesome. Anything else that we need to bring to our audience related to mole cricket that you want to share?
I think just please, if you are able, fill out that survey that will be posted in association with the podcast. That'll really help us get a better handle on the mole cricket problem, because we're still at the stage where we're trying to tease apart why are mole crickets apparently a problem in some people's pastures and not a problem in other people's pastures.
Yep. And by the way, that survey is very important for us as well as researchers, because if we can demonstrate that this is a problem, that means we can probably find more funding, more support to tackle the problem. That's how science works. We have a problem, we demonstrate, we look for funding, we investigate the solutions. Dr. Lepla, Wilhelm, really appreciate y'all coming for the podcast today. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage Team with technical support from the University of Florida College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Valau, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kanabrowski. We hope you have enjoyed this podcast. If you have any comments or thoughts to share with us, please reach out to us through our email, forages@ifas.ufl.edu, and find us on our social media, uf.forages on Instagram, UF Forage Team on Facebook, or UF IFAS Forages on YouTube. We hope to see you in our next episode.